Outside of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, summer 2021 has been pretty devoid of notable AAA games, which has left room for fantastic indie titles to dominate these hot and humid days. Games such as 12 Minutes, The Ascent, and Death's Door have been at least covered by many major reviewers on YouTube, with some of them being deemed worthy of Game of the Year consideration. I don't want to take away from any of these titles, but there's an excellent indie game that's flying completely under the radar that you absolutely need to know about. So, I guess it's up to me to introduce you to Dodgeball Academia. Dodgeball Academia was developed by Pocket Trap, a small indie studio based in Brazil. The game was picked up and published by Humble Games and was released in early August for all of the consoles and PC. In it, you play as Otto, a young teen with aspirations to become the greatest dodgeball player in all the lands. Along the way, you'll meet up with memorable characters and pesky rivals who will aid and hinder your journey, respectively. The narrative is told in an episodic structure, meaning you can play at your own pace. You can complete an episode a day for a week, or you can binge the entire experience like a hit show on Netflix. The 2D hand-drawn dodgeballers are lovingly crafted, and the 3D world they inhabit is vibrant and full of life. The art style, animation, and characters absolutely steal the show. But what truly holds this game together is its combat system that continuously builds on itself by offering up innovative variations on the dodgeball formula as the game progresses. They built a core combat experience and found interesting ways to shake things up without ever diluting the action too much. Its fast-paced, fanatic, and frenzied combat kept me hooked from the first match to the last. And all of these factors are evidence of a game that was lovingly crafted, so please, allow me to tell you more. Welcome to my review of Dodgeball Academia. The game sees you doing two things: advancing the story passively, or engaging in fights in this modern-day equivalent of the Roman Colosseum. You won't be surprised to hear that the core feature of Dodgeball Academia's 10-hour campaign is, of course, playing dodgeball, a sport whose name alone will either excitedly boil your blood or send shivers down your spine. Jocks rejoice and nerds wince. Any discussion of this game must begin with the dodgeball mechanics, as it's the primary way the game will engage you, and I'm happy to report things are handled very well. On paper, it seems like Dodgeball would offer very little in terms of variation, but Dodgeball Academia modifies the experience throughout. Starting with the roots of the combat system though, you'll quickly find out that fights involve two teams, yours and the enemy's. Some battles will see you fighting solo or alongside up to two others to create a team of 2 or 3. Enemy teams are structured similarly, but they max out at around 6 characters. The arena you fight in can vary a little bit, and your weapons are of course the infamous dodgeballs. Each match will spawn a handful of these spherical armaments, and teams will rush the center of the court, grab as many of them as possible, and then let the fireworks fly. Each contender has a health bar that must be depleted to eliminate them from that match, and the event is over when one team has no players remaining. In some instances, players who are knocked out can still participate in the game by moving behind enemy lines and racking up bonus damage with any stray balls they come across. So these components make up the basic rhythm and flow to combat, and every match will play out exactly like this. Again, this might sound repetitive, but that just isn't the case. Instead, these features provide a solid foundation for the game to springboard from by alternating almost every element of the sport. So, let's see how they do it. I've already mentioned that the field size can vary slightly depending on where you're fighting, but there's also the fields with overgrown grass that restricts your view, and icy terrains that will see your players slipping and sliding more. These maps provide an extra challenge to overcome, but aren't used frequently enough to create frustration. It's well balanced. So already you can see just how much thought has gone into the smallest element of Dodgeball, the one you would forget the most, the field, and that's only the most minor changes the game makes to the sport. One of the biggest factors you'll notice across the playthrough is the variation in types of balls that can be wielded. You of course have your standard dodgeballs, but also extra variants that apply status conditions, such as fireballs that chip away at your enemy's health with burn damage, or gummy balls that will temporarily lock you in place without restricting your ability to throw. There's also ones that slow your speed, apply poison damage, prevent you from healing, and much more. Each fight mixes and matches these different ball types, which adds variety and a little strategy while playing. My only minor complaint here is that I wish you could cycle between the balls you're currently holding in order to use certain ones first. To the best of my knowledge, this isn't possible, but it probably wasn't included because going into a menu to rotate the balls would have taken away from the fast-paced action. And moving on, we of course have the players themselves. Each of them controls differently due to various stats, while also including special charge throws and super moves for all members. Shoy the cat, for example, has a higher speed and agility stat, but he can't throw as hard. Otto is slower, but can tank and deal more damage. You get the idea. Most of these stats were easy to comprehend, except for the technique stat, which I never fully understood. Besides this though, the players also have charge abilities, which are different from charge throws. These apply bonus effects such as added defense at the cost of power, increasing your super meter fill rate, and lending HP to your teammates. These were super useful, and to add just a little bit more variety, some characters also throw the ball slightly differently. I was delighted to see Kiabo lob a ball deep in the air and then whip one right at an opponent right after. It's a strategy that harkens back to high school gymnasiums across the country. Opponents are also capable of doing these alternative throws, such as Luna's throw, which starts with an illusion before the real ball makes contact. It's designed to throw off your timing, and you'll have to adjust to avoid damage. It's wonderful. And then there's the charge throws that I mentioned before. Suneko's charge throw is capable of hitting enemies multiple times, Otto's is capable of doing burn damage, and Ballooni's will do piercing damage across multiple foes. And finally, the coup de grace, your super moves. These are ultra powerful moves that can turn the tide of battle. Each are different enough, but I found Otto's super move to be so much more formidable when compared to the others that I used it exclusively over the final hours of the adventure. So, that was a lot. We had charge throws, we had charged moves, we had throw types, we had stats, we had super moves. There's a lot there, and again, that's just the players. Hopefully, by breaking it down like this, you can see just how innovative they've gotten with the game of Dodgeball. The team clearly had a lot of great ideas, and they worked hard to incorporate as many of them as possible to ensure that the combat system never felt repetitive despite the nature of playing the same sport over and over again, match after match. It allowed for the experience to always feel fresh, and in my journey, it culminated with a power rush towards the game's finale. This allowed me to end the game on a high note, which is always a good thing. Now, some may argue that the game is too easy, and I can certainly see that being the case. I only lost a handful of fights across my 10 hours with the game, and most of those came against bosses that were meant to be a challenge. However, the title takes a relatively simple but effective approach to difficulty, as you can modify damage dealt and damage received in the menus. You can adjust these two stats from 0% to 400%, meaning that you can make the experience as easy or as difficult as you'd like. I found this to be very useful during one side quest where you must complete an underground tournament featuring 5 matches without the ability to heal between each fight. I tried it a few times, I never got very far, but adjusting the sliders allowed me to defeat it with ease so that I could grab that coveted trophy for completing all side quests. This was the only time I felt the need to adjust the difficulty, but I wanted to bring it up because I feel this system is very player friendly and allows you to tailor the experience to your liking. Overall, combat was a treat in this game, and it featured some of the freshest and funnest gameplay I've experienced in 2021. It amazes me that the combat never felt stale, and that's a testament to how many ideas were brainstormed, elaborated upon, and polished up for the final release of the game. The entire purpose of the game is to assemble a team of excellent dodgeball players to win the school tournament. You do this across the span of 8 in-game days, with other main quest lines making up the bulk of the experience by supplementing that overall objective. A typical day will see you moving from location to location, talking to NPCs, completing side quests, and solving problems as they arise. And by solving problems, I of course mean clobbering people with dodgeballs until only you and your teammates are left standing. To do this, you'll have to pay close attention to your team composition as well as the equipment attached to each player. This represents the smaller component of the gameplay, but it's still an important one. You'll start the game as Otto, and you'll slowly add players to your team across the days to come. Each time you unlock a new member, it's fun to experiment with their playstyle to determine if they fit in with how you prefer to play. The first 75% of the game saw me switching between new characters as I unlocked them, and then rolling with my 3 favorites afterwards. Otto and Balloony were usually locks to the team, as Otto's damage output was massive, and Balloony's ability to heal the team was super useful. The third team member kept rotating, which was fine. However, across the final 25% of the game, I started to experiment more with the equipment and built a team that allowed Otto to dominate the field of competition. I did this by using him, Balloony, and Kiabo. I played primarily as Otto and rarely switched to the other 2 during fights. I'd use Balloony to heal up Otto, and I equipped Kiabo with an item that allowed him to absorb damage that Otto would have taken. This allowed me to create a powerhouse with Otto, as I could charge up his super move and use it to wipe the floor with the opponent's faces. And this was cool because it felt like a build that I had come up with on my own through experimentation, and that was super rewarding. It seems to me that similar strategies could be developed using the other characters, making team building a great feature in this title. One thing that aided my experimentation in team building was the leveling system that constantly saw me unlocking new abilities and upgraded moves for my players. These changes to how they handled encouraged me to try out new characters that I had previously dismissed, which was good. By far though, the equipment was the defining feature of the customization. Each combatant can hold 2 pieces of equipment that contain various perks, such as increasing stats at the cost of others, allowing for additional HP, increasing the supercharge meter faster, and more. There were also some specialty items that added unique modifiers, such as increasing your strength by a large percentage while making your HP 1. Clearly, that's an item intended for hardcore fans who want to challenge themselves and play as a glass cannon. It's a niche piece of equipment, but it and other items like it help in creating more opportunities to play the game how you want, which is fantastic. And items and equipment can be purchased from 3 different vendors across the map. One specializes in equipment, one in healing items, and one in drinks that boost certain stats. Oh, and a quick note here on the healing items. As if this game wasn't already polished enough, each character has foods and drinks that they like, dislike, are neutral to, and are allergic to. It's a little touch that adds more detail to the characters you play as, and that's a good thing in a game that's as character-driven as Dodgeball Academia. Speaking of the characters, let's transition into a brief discussion on the game's story. I'm going to do my best to avoid huge plot spoilers, so I won't be recapping the events in their entirety. Instead, let me offer a brief overview of what's going on here before discussing what this story is truly all about. At the beginning of the game, you play as Otto, a young man who has just transferred to a new academy that specializes in the wild sport of dodgeball. He has aspirations to become the greatest dodgeball player ever, and looks forward to meeting new friends along the way. There's 8 in-game days to play through, and most of these focus on completing the overall objective of the game, which is winning the school's annual dodgeball tournament. However, it isn't all tournaments all the time. A handful of episodes dive into events not directly relating to the tournament, which not only provides a breath of fresh air, but also offers up opportunities to explore the litany of other characters in the game. There's also a couple of other small plot lines to follow through as the days go by, but most of these relate to the characters. So, if you couldn't tell by now, Dodgeball Academia is not really a game driven by its plot, but instead by its characters. The Academy is full of wacky and weird characters that are heavily inspired by Saturday morning cartoons. It all starts with Otto, who is your typical happy-go-lucky kid with a heart of gold and a tendency towards competitiveness. He's super friendly and wants everyone to feel welcomed, but he also wants to win. And if you've ever watched Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, he reminds me a lot of Jaden Yugi in this regard. Anyway, Otto is the linchpin for this story, as it mostly revolves around him, his desire to win the tournament, and making his father proud while breaking out of his shadow. But the supporting cast is what really steals the show, as every character is hand-drawn and animated in a way to accentuate their personality. More on this later, but for now, let me just say that there are a ton of characters to meet across the semester, and each of them act as a walking cliché. Now, that might sound like a bad thing, but it's really not. The game takes the typical high school tropes like the nerd, the misunderstood bully, the crazy girl, the scaredy cat, and much more, and turns them into likable characters. Even the ones who act antagonistically towards Otto and the team are given sympathetic sides so that you come to enjoy them as well. Characters like Balloony and Mina are complete opposites, making Otto feel more balanced while also allowing for multiple perspectives to be shared on each event that unfolds. I also really enjoyed the staff, especially Makeko, the professor who's obsessed with strength at all costs. He takes training to the extreme, so much so that he has his students play dodgeball in the middle of traffic. It's hilarious. And speaking of humor, it's pretty much the game's bread and butter when it comes to dialogue. Again, these characters are meant to fit the cliches of a high school from any town USA, and so leaning headfirst into those personas for comedic effect was a worthwhile endeavor. It keeps the game lighthearted, fun, and charming, which fits perfectly with not only the aesthetics, but also the cartoon feel that the title is clearly trying to capture. Taking a step back though, I have 2 gripes with the storytelling here, but they are relatively minor. One is how often the game decides to send you to the other side of the map to interact with a specific character or to find an item to advance the story. There's far too many instances in this game in which you reach a quest objective, hear some dialogue for a minute or two, complete a fight, and then are sent to another area to continue the quest, and they repeat this process over and over again. This started to wear on me in the final 3 days of the 8-day journey, but it never got insultingly bad. If this game had gone on for any longer, it would have been a bigger point of contention for me. My other knock against the storytelling was with its handling of one character in particular, Shoy. This feline student doesn't really get an arc throughout the game, not even a minor one. All the other members of your team get some time in the spotlight, but that moment never comes from Shoy. You find him in the dingy sewers that host the underground dodgeball tournament, and he asks to join your team. Otto lets him tag along, and then that's about it for his character. He's just kind of there. I'm not sure why this one character gets put on the back burner when everyone else has their moment to shine. It just felt off, and it affected my gameplay experience as I hardly ever used him in combat because I usually forgot that he was even there. Besides this though, I love the characters, the themes, and the story beats of Dodgeball Academia. It's easily one of the best cast of characters I've gotten to know in a game this year. Dodgeball Academia is one of the most unique looking games I've ever played. It's natural to feel a little apprehensive when you hear that 2D hand-drawn models are going to be used in a 3D world, but luckily so much work has gone into the animation that everything looks and feels great. I want to start by talking about these character models because they're excellent. Everyone's given a default pose, and these do a fantastic job of highlighting that character's personality in just one shot. For example, Otto puts his hands on his side and stands there confidently and focused. Meanwhile, Balloony pokes his fingers together like a nervous wreck. These are just a few examples, but you'll be amazed by how much you can learn about the characters simply from these poses. However, the game is also plentiful with the number of alternative animations, meaning these characters can also express emotions relating to the events unfolding around them. This, paired with the excellent manipulation of the written dialogue, helps in conveying the emotion of every scene without voice actors even being required. I've mentioned a few times throughout this video about the little touches that have gone into the game to make the gameplay feel more dynamic. And I'm happy to report that this same level of precision has been applied to the presentation to make this world and its inhabitants truly feel alive. The 3D school also provides a solid basis for the story events to unfold on. As you continue progressing through episodes, more of its lands become accessible, including the parking lot, the forest, and an icy mountainside where the school's radio tower is. At first, it may feel like the game is light on environments to explore, but given how often you're asked to move between these locations during the main quests, it was probably best to reduce the number of areas to avoid even more backtracking. With what we have now, there's plenty of different exterior and interior locations to visit, each with their own color palette and atmosphere, which I appreciated. The sound work throughout the game was also of exceptional quality. In particular, the sounds of dodgeball matches were spot on. From the opening seconds where the dodgeballs hit the playing field, to the sound of them colliding with an opponent's noggin, and of course, the pixelated noise that plays when triggering your super move, all of it sounded fantastic and helped solidify the action. Sound work is always one of those components that the player must take time to appreciate. Good sound work often goes unnoticed, but bad sound work often drags you out of the experience entirely. And again, I'm happy to say that everything in this game, within combat or not, sounds really good. With that being said, the one element of the presentation that felt a little lackluster was the music. It didn't really stand out to me as being particularly amazing or bad, but it did get repetitive. In particular, there's only one battle theme that's played throughout the game, and having some extra tracks to play could have spiced things up a bit more. The same goes for the overworld theme that's used while navigating the school's grounds. Different tracks are used while in the forest and the icy realms, but a majority of the time, you'll be on campus and you're hearing the same tune over and over again. It's also slightly more in your face than the other tracks, which made it feel more grating. The music was fine, I just wish there was a little bit more variety. Still, the obvious effort that was put into the character design, the color palette, the animation quality, and the little touches to tie it all together were enough to overcome this. Straight up, Dodgeball Academia is one of the best games I've played in 2021, and it comes highly recommended from me. If you're looking for a fun, light-hearted adventure with delightful characters and a great combat system, look no farther than this underrated indie hit. The team behind this title clearly loved the project and poured their heart and soul into making it as good as it could possibly be. The combat system is chaotic in the best possible way and leaves you wanting to play just one more match. Dodgeball has never felt so satisfying, and a large part of that is due to how dedicated the title is to mixing up every basic element of the sport for the better. It's also aided by some minor but effective team building decisions and character abilities that take things to the next level. This represents the meat of the experience, but don't sleep on the excellent characters that inhabit this cartoony world. Expect to get into wacky and hilarious situations that will make you feel like a kid watching cartoons all over again. And it's all presented with a careful attention to detail, as many small touches have been included to enrich your playthrough. And look, even if you aren't totally sold yet, let me add on to the praise by saying that the game also includes a local versus mode so that you and your friends can take out your aggression with a fierce match of dodgeball whenever you want. It's not much, but it's extra value on top of a memorable 10-hour campaign. For me, playing dodgeball in high school is one of my favorite memories of my youth, and this game was able to transport me back to those times. But even putting the nostalgia to the side, Dodgeball Academia is a brilliant game that is well worth your time, so please go out and play it. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, or a dislike if you didn't. Consider subscribing for more. Follow me on Twitter @NopeNatNarp. And as always guys, have a nice day, and take care.